So during my reading phase, it's important to remember that as I go through the prescribed text, that there will be some interactive elements to it. So it's not just a matter of reading down here, it is a matter of when you've got pictures like this, typically there may be some sort of system that brings up extra information. So as you do go through and read, and I'm not attempting to take notes at the moment, just be aware of looking for any interactive elements that might come up. They might be simple things like this, but if you miss them, you miss them, and that's going to be a major gap in your knowledge. So just be mindful of these interactivity as you're reading. The next phase after my reading will be to take my notes from reading. So talking about taking the notes from the reading, the method that I would use is that as I do my second read through, basically any terms that I see here that I'm not completely familiar with, I need to go ahead and jot those down on my note-taking document here. So as I go through here, for example, I might see the term KPI, which I'm not familiar with, so I'll jot that down. And what I'll need to do is either from the context of the reading here uncover a bit more about what KPIs are, or as will sometimes be the case, KPIs perhaps aren't explained within the context of this reading. Perhaps there's something that would have been covered in another unit, or there's some expectation that you already know what a KPI is. So I might need to go do some investigation on what KPIs are so I can understand a bit better. Just knowing that they're performance measures really doesn't cut it. I'll need to know a lot more than that. So one of the things I'd tend to do, apart from just jumping on the internet and Googling KPIs, which is a good start, is I have my management book that goes with the course. So for the Diploma of Management, we've got the white-covered Judith Dwyer book called Management Strategies and Skills. And if I just pop into the index of there and look to my Ks and KPIs, I can find there that there is a entry that talks about key performance indicators, and it's covered on page 166 and 305 and 399. And then it also talks about KPIs for operational plans on page 333, 334, and strategic and operational plans 645. So that may not be exactly what I'm after as far as budget financial management goes, but it'll at least give me a broader understanding of what KPIs are in general. So I'll go ahead and start to take those notes of any particular terms that I'm not familiar with, and also headings that come up. So for example, I'll write whatever information I'll write about KPIs, but I can see over here that I'm looking at a part that deals with accessing budgetary information, and then I'll start to take some sub notes based on my reading that I do here and some of the headings that come up. So I'll go ahead and take some of those notes and then come back and show you the results of that, and you can compare that with how you would take your notes. So here I am after taking some notes from these first 9 pages of reading. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the notes I've actually taken and how I came about those notes themselves. So one of the things I decided to do as I took the notes was to actually just make a little note of what page number I was on at the time, because I will probably need to refer back to these when I'm actually answering the questions. Now keep in mind I haven't even had a look at the questions yet. So this is just note-taking based on things that I found either interesting, relevant, or didn't know about. So from this page 2, I've got a few little bits of information that has summarized in some way the information that's there in front of me. So, and by typing this down, I'm making the learning process become a tactile process where the information will stick much better. If you just read things or just watch things, that information tends not to stick. But when you actually do something with that, even if it's just writing things down or typing things down, it can make that information stick a bit better. So of all the information that's here, one of the most interesting areas of the reading was the term KPI was used, a key performance indicator, and so I decided to note that down as something to do some research on, because throughout the rest of the reading there's no actual real explanation of what KPIs are. So I've summarized it in 3 words. It's how you measure success. It's things that you have to help you measure success. Now, what I decided to do, as I mentioned earlier, was refer back to my management book, the Judith Dwyer Management Strategies and Skills book with the white cover. And one of the things that I found there was a reference to an acronym known as SMARTER. Now, a lot of you would have already been aware of the acronym SMART. This is a bit of an extension of the SMART acronym. Now, I've actually had not heard of this one before, so that's why I found it interesting. So each of the letters in the acronym stand for these main points. And again, the relevance of this is it's helping me understand, how do I make a KPI? Well, KPIs, whenever I make them, they need to be specific in terms of they identify what I'm looking at. The M is for measurable. Now I've put there quantifiable, which is to say that usually some sort of number. I need to do 10 of this, or something that I can measure by a number. Then we've got A for achievable. It's got to be a realistic performance point that I can reach. Then I've got, for the R, relevant. If you're setting KPIs for people and they're not relevant to those staff, well, they're probably not going to try too hard to reach those KPIs. The T was for time referenced, so it needs to be time framed. It needs to be, again, it's one of these measurable things. Do something by X number of days or X number of months. And the other T was for trackable, and so it needs to be something that we can measure continually. So it's not just something you set and then a month down the track see how it went. You should be measuring that over time. And then the last letter of the acronym was for A, which was for agreed. And again, that's getting buy-in from your team who might be affected by this key performance indicator. So there's consensus or understanding of why that's there. So that information came from the textbook, and you actually struggle to find, if you were to Google this acronym, you actually find it's for something quite different than management terms. So that was quite specific to the book, so I wrote that down. Now, the reason that that's even remotely relevant to me anyhow is at some point I'll need to be making these budgets, these financial plans, and the suggestion here is that KPIs are going to be a key part of that, so I'd better understand on how to actually establish KPIs. So that's why it was so important to get all that information down. And then moving on to the next page. So this was one of these interactive pages. One, I've actually got a heading there, which I've put the heading down. I've jotted the page number down as well. And so this part I'm reading here is all about accessing budgetary information. So the notes that I've made from having a look through all this interactive slides here was as follows. That we're going to be accessing budgetary information. It needs to be reliable information. So it's going to tell us things such as what and what not to do, how to actually do things, the current practices that are already used, the best practices that should be used, which might not actually be our current practices, who and when to do it, resources required, expected results, actual versus expected results. And all of this is going to feed back into helping us establish financial plans. And I've got a little bit more information there on what's on the page 3 here. And the note here is that the financial data that we're going to collect is critical because it's going to feed into all sorts of different other plans, our overall organizational plans, which include things like strategic plans and operational plans. Now, for me, this was another key trigger. I wasn't particularly up to speed with what strategic plans were or operational plans were, or perhaps the difference between the two. So I made a note of jotting those down and then doing a bit of research on them. So the purpose of this unit is actually not to teach me what strategic plans and operational plans are. They will actually come up in other units. But I decided to refer to my textbook once again to get some background information. And as it turns out, there are actually entire chapters set aside for how to establish strategic plans and how to establish operational plans. Now, that might be a bit alarming that there's an entire 2 chapters of information there that I might read. But we need to rewind a little bit. This is a diploma course that you're undertaking. You're learning these skills so you can become an excellent business manager. So suck it up and do the study. You're not here just to answer questions. You're here to learn and acquire information, and this is a really good opportunity to do that. So if you were like me and weren't particularly aware of what strategic plans actually were and operational plans were, it's time to hit the books. Now, I also could use the internet for that as well. One of the issues with using the internet to find out this information is that it's sometimes open to interpretation, and so what we try and do is restrict you or limit you to your reading primarily via the eLearning website and also via the textbook. And if you can't find the information you're after in there, or you're not happy with the extent of the information that's in there, then by all means expand your knowledge hunting out to include Google and start to search on those key terms. But when it comes back to it, the very, very abbreviated idea of what a strategic plan was it's something that provides short and long-term framework for decision making. It needs to analyze internal and external environment data for emerging opportunities and changes. Now, we're not talking about environment as in the trees. We're talking about the operational environment, the competitive environment, things like that. And that's what strategic plans were about. Again, that's a very, very brief explanation. And operational plans answers the question of how will we deliver our services, and what alignment is there to the strategic plan from the operational plan. So the operational plans feed off the strategic plans and are a bit more specific than the strategic plans. It determines outputs, how we'll do things, our capabilities to do things, accountability, budgets, and so on. Now, once again, that might sound like we're getting off the track a bit. This unit's all about budgets, but we need to be aware of, well, why is this budgetary information, this financial information important? Because it's going to feed into these other key critical plans that you're going to be responsible for as well. And just one last little note that I made for this page 3 was just a bit of a clearer definition of what resources were. And it happily includes things like people, time, capital, products, equipment, and more than that as well. So that just gives me that depth of knowledge. So what we'll do in the next video is just continue on to have a look at how I then broke down the following pages of information from page 4 to page 9.